Okay, guys, so welcome to tonight's show. We are unexpectedly live with Harvey, aka Mr. Colitis Stoma. You can find him on Instagram. He has saved the day for my live show, as unfortunately our scheduled guest has had a serious accident and is in hospital. And we wish her all the best and hopefully has a speedy recovery and no long-term damage, and we will speak to Pops whenever she gets out of hospital and is up to come in on the show. So without further ado, guys, let's introduce Harvey. So Harvey, if you just introduce yourself to guys, let them know a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get stuck into the show.
Hello, so I'm a 17-year-old teenager who has had ulcerative colitis since I was 14. I have trialed all of the medication from Salifac all the way up to infliximab, and then underwent two surgeries. One to try and save my colon by diverting it, and then the second one to remove it, as the first one completely failed. So now I'm living with an ileostomy bag at the age of 17 and having 100 times better quality of life, and now training for an Ironman in September. So
amazing. And what was life like for you before diagnosis? Because you're exceptionally young, almost abnormally young for being diagnosed with a disease that's quite commonly diagnosed between 18 and 30. So what was life like for you prior to diagnosis? What was going through your world? Because I'm sure you were suffering quite badly from symptoms and stuff. Do you mind just delving into that for me?
So since birth, I've always had asthma, eczema, and hay fever. The terrific three, not terrific three, demon three, where multiple autoimmune diseases come out of the immunosuppressive nature of those conditions. And I've always, since about the age of 13, I started noticing changes in my bowel habits, and then I questioned it and kept on questioning it, and then all of a sudden I started having about a month of bloody stools out of completely nowhere, and the doctor said to me, you'll have to go for a colonoscopy. And you're like, oh, what's a colonoscopy, being 14 and not heard of any of these terms before? And
oh wow, 14.
Yeah, it's kind of taken off from there. I had a positive diagnosis of ulcerative colitis, which I was kind of glad of, that it wasn't Crohn's, and in some ways I believe that Crohn's is more severe because it can affect a greater portion of the digestive system. But mine affected from my anus to the transverse colon, so 2/3 of the colon.
That's quite a high up.
Yeah, and my symptoms were fairly mild in terms of the fact that they were just bloody stools. I didn't have any anemia or any other malabsorption side effects. It was predominantly just going 20 to 30 times a day, which is not nice at all, but at least there was only one side effect and one symptom.
What were your initial thoughts whenever you started seeing that you were passing blood into the toilet? As a 14-year-old, how did that strike you?
Well, instant thoughts. I was in denial and always were in flare-ups. I'd have to go for at least a couple of days for it fully to sink in that I was having another flare-up again. And then he kind of dooms on you that you have to kind of do something from there, and that's kind of the worst thing, trying to work out what the best strategy is, and worrying and the anxiety associated with the hospital and all the bad memories that you've had already with the diagnosis processes to having possible other treatments and having to look at the other long list of side effects from the drugs and all sorts.
So whenever you were diagnosed, were you hospitalized, or were you able to be outside of hospital?
I wasn't hospitalised. I was just stuck on Salifac, and it calmed down for about 3 months, and then 3 months later I was stuck on steroids, and that helped to prednisolone, that helped to calm it down. But my flare-ups happened every 6 months or so. So I had one.
Oh wow, that's very frequent.
Yeah, and then so I was hospitalised for 2 main ones with IV prednisolone, and then of course at home. And then when I was 16, so last 2019, was kind of flared 4 or 5 times in a year, but they were only I call them short flare-ups because they only lasted for about 2 weeks. Because they I was on azathioprine at this time, and it didn't seem to calm it down. It calmed it down on the whole, but when I fled, and it required enema intervention, and they are by far the worst treatment of all the treatments you can be on.
Yeah, definitely. So what happened then in the last sort of year that's resulted in you requiring surgery? What was going on there, and how soon did they start to discuss surgery as a viable option with you?
So last year, so 2020, started with a flare-up in January, lasted for about 2 weeks, cleared up on itself after using enemas for about a week, and then didn't flare at all till spring, May time, and started just seeing bloods. Then was back on the enemas, managed to get it down in June to going once every other day bleeding, but then I couldn't get it down any further, so I went back to the...
And what was going through your mind at that point then?
Well, I was kind of just like, well, it is what it is. It's got better, but it still could be a lot better, and I don't want to make it worse by ramping up a treatment at the same time. And I sort of feel guilty for leaving it longer than I probably should have done, because I did leave it probably 2 or 3 weeks before I did go and speak to my IBD team again, and was like, this isn't working. So then they tried me on budesonide, which is a steroid, but unfortunately due to COVID they wouldn't put me on prednisolone because it suppresses the immune system too much, and budesonide made things 10 times worse. Instead of working, it caused bleeding, which funny enough is one of their side effects, which is a bit odd. Like, why would you make a drug that's supposed to prevent it? But hey ho. And then the pain got so bad that in July, end of July, start of August, I went to hospital, and I was trialled on hydrocortisone steroids to try and calm it down, because I just thought it was a normal flare-up, just a really bad one. Tried that for 3 days, then had a flexi sigmoidoscope with gas and air, which was horrible because I was had a general for my colonoscopy when I was diagnosed, so not a nice experience. And then was trialled on infliximab for 3 days, but that made my intestine was so raw and diseased at that point, it didn't make an impact at all. And because, infliximab is called the wonder drug, as the doctors and nurses call it, but it only has it has an 80% success rate, and 20% when you're feeling ill seems more than 20%. And I was being rather pessimistic at the time and was like, surgery is coming closer and closer. But this was over the weekend, and I discussed quickly with my consultant that I wanted surgery because I knew things weren't going to work. And she was like, "Oh, we'll talk about it on Monday." Sunday, I was getting so bad that I was signing papers to say that I was going to have emergency surgery if things didn't improve. And luckily, I managed to wait it out till the Monday morning, where the surgeon came round, said he was going to do a subtotal colectomy at first, but then he changed his mind because of my age and not ticking the severe flare-up criteria, as he called it, which is like having anemia, having a megatoxic colon. But then I said, I'm having bleeding and it's causing a lot of pain, and he was just like, well, this is what I'm doing, and if you want something done, this is what I'm going to do. And I was just like, well, I want something done, might as well just take that option. So I took the option, and had the surgery, kind of recovered. Next couple of days in the hospital, doing well for myself. Then developed an ileus, where the small intestine stops working, common side effect of bowel surgery when they fiddle with it. And then I just kept on eating and stuff. The problem with the ileus is you either pass it or you don't, and you have to throw it up. And I threw up like 2.5 litres in the space of about 20 minutes, which is quite relieving. But
did you end up with an NG tube or anything like that?
No, I didn't have an NG tube that time. Then went home, was discharged on the Tuesday the following week. Went home for 3 days. The periostasis of the gut was still intact, which progressively made my condition worse, causing a lot of pain, discomfort, going 20 to 30 times a day, even though I didn't have a working colon. It was a rather weird experience and a very painful one, to say the least. Waking like 5 or 6 times in the night, so not comfortable at all. Went back in on the Friday for like regular blood checkup, as they booked it in. And the doctor who saw me first was like, yeah, you need to have surgery, you need to get your colon out before further complications happen. They did the surgery on that Sunday. The surgery lasted for 8.5 hours because of the severity of how my colon was, and I bled a lot and all other complications. So because I bled so much, they couldn't save the first stoma they made, so they had to make a second one. So I have a redundant stoma and I have a working stoma, so it was quite cool. And then went into critical care for 3 days. Was doing well. Got discharged for the ward for about 48 hours. Went back to critical care after I developed a lung infection, a rectal stump blowout, and another ileus. And therefore I just had to be looked after, one-on-one care, because the ward team couldn't look after me. I was on 100% oxygen for about 4 days, just couldn't breathe. It was horrible, but managed to.
And were you still awake at this time when you were 100% oxygen?
Yeah, I watched people come in and out in the cycle of life, as you call it. A couple of people died, and hearing a couple of conversations that are like, realizing being in critical care actually means life or death. You either come out of it walking and going back, well, not quite walking, going back to the wards and recovering well, or you go to Rose Hill Cottage and
So you're 17 and from the age of 14, you've been bouncing from medication to medication. You've now had some surgery and you're in critical care. Like, how does this make you feel about your life to date? And, do you feel any grief or annoyance or anger towards the disease or anything like that? Like you've lost your teenage years? Because you've had a lot happen in a very short space of time, and at a very young age as well. Like what's happened to you? How do you feel about that? What's your emotions?
Well, I used to get really quite annoyed with the disease and all sorts, but since having the bag and having the bag for 6 months now, it's kind of it gave me a new life and more control over my life, because you can do whatever you like and not have to worry about going to the toilet. And obviously that's the biggest thing with the bowel condition. And yeah, I wouldn't say I have any anger towards the disease anymore, because it is what it is, and kind of just got to get on with it. That is kind of my philosophy. You've given a life, you might as well make the most of it and make the best possible life possible.
I think that's a really good outlook to have. So for you then, what would be your top 3 things to advise someone of your sort of age group? Like say your 14-year-old self, or someone between the ages of 14 and 17, what 3 things would you say have helped you the most, or would be your best top 3 bits of advice?
Probably staying fit and healthy, like trying to work out as much as possible, and just keeping your mind focused on one thing that's not on the disease and not on stress related stuff, and not putting too much stress on yourself. And I do triathlon, so a lot of running and time by myself does help to pass depressing and unwanted thoughts through your head, and just get your mind set on wanting to do something and achieve that one goal. Also, probably listening to music and just calming your nerves and making sure you get rid of much stress as possible, and that can be quite an easy task. You can just listen to one song or whatever. And then the last thing probably would be having a look into surgery and making sure you're aware of surgery, even though you may be diagnosed and just diagnosed. I know it's a really scary thing, and I remember a conversation I had with my psychologist at the time after I got diagnosed, saying that you're a long way off surgery. But looking back, that was only 2.5 years ago, and in reality that's not a very long time. So it would have been good to have that mindset to know that there is another option if all else fails.
Mm-hmm.
And also just talking to people that have the disease and making you feel comfortable about talking about it.
Yeah. So whenever you mentioned you were scared, had you ever heard of having an ostomy, or did you ever, how much awareness did you have about the surgical procedures related to your disease? And, was that a scary prospect in terms of having a stoma, or was it scary just the thought of the surgery?
The scary prospect was having something for the rest of your life and having to make that decision, or having that decision made for you at the age of 17. It was probably the most scary thing. But I was quite thankful that was out of my control, and that fate kind of decided what was going to happen. Because making that decision is hard enough as it is, but the awareness for stomas and stuff is very limited, I found. And before you do a lot of research into it, you can't find much information, and that is one of the reasons I started a YouTube channel, to try and promote it and just make people aware of it. Because you associate stoma with bowel cancer or an old person, when actually it gives a teenager or a person in their early 20s or early 30s a new lease of life. And in reality, they're able to claw their life back with a disease that they've been fighting for the last 5 or 6 years. And like me, it's enabled me post surgery 6 weeks to pass my driving test. And
what's your YouTube channel called?
Mr. Colitis -stoma.
That's amazing. And what sort of stuff is it you're talking about on your YouTube channel?
What inflammatory bowel disease is, the kind of what the diagnosis is, what the diagnosis processes are, my diagnosis, a bit about myself, and yeah, kind of and I've done a bit of the causes of inflammatory bowel disease as well, because I wrote a A-level project on inflammatory bowel disease and what treatment is the best for treating inflammatory bowel disease. And my conclusions were that in a severe case of disease, like myself, having a flare-up every 6 months, surgery should be the most viable option, as it would give someone a new lease of life. But also making people more aware of having the option of surgery if they want to pursue that. Because obviously the medical doctors are all about treating with medicine rather than cutting you open and removing a body part, when in reality cutting you open and removing the colon might be the best option, or resecting it for Crohn's disease. But it all depends on that. And I found that doctors, well, from personal experience, doctors should treat patients as individuals rather than categorically treat them, which is kind of quite a big part to their treatment.
Okay. I think that's a really interesting aspect as well, to try and move away from what would be considered statistical treatment, or leaning on the statistics and categorizing, like you say, to actually looking at the individual merits for doing a certain action dependent on that person's individual needs. I think it's, there's a lot of room for that out there. So whenever you woke up from your surgery after finally getting it, how did you feel? Again, as a 17-year-old man looking down at your abdomen and seeing an ostomy bag, what was your initial impressions, and how is life now?
So luckily, the first time I saw it after the first operation, I fainted, but after the second one, I just saw it and was like, it's my new bag. At least I don't have to move to go to the toilet now. I can just lay here and the nurse can empty it for me. Kind of in bed rest now and just got to rest up. But the worst thing was looking down at the scar and seeing when they finally took the plaster off, or the scar cover, seeing how many staples I had. I counted them and I had about 24. And it was fascinating to see how many staples you can fit in, or they managed to fit in that like 6 inches of scar. But it was a bit overwhelming in that part, just having the scar. But now I've kind of embraced it and want to show off and say this is the reason I got a scar, and just make people aware of it, really.
Yeah, totally. So for you, how has life changed now? Is it changed for the better in your opinion? And what is it specifically for you that has changed?
Yeah, it's definitely changed 100 times better in my opinion, because not having to go to the toilet as frequently and not having the pain, and the pain is the worst thing. And that was probably the worst thing from my before the surgery. I was in so much pain, never experienced that level of pain before. My flare-ups were always about a 2 or a 3, like manageable, but needed a bit of like paracetamol IV. But this time I needed morphine and oxycodone just to be able to treat the pain, and it was just since the pain's gone, I can run 10k in 55 minutes, bench press 60 odd kilos, and kind of back up to where I was before the surgery. Just building myself up and not having to go to the toilet like 5 or 6 times a day, even though I do empty my bag about 3 times during the day and maybe once or twice in the night, just for peace of mind really, in the night, to make sure it doesn't leak, because that's the biggest worry of having the bag. But that's like one worry compared to 2 or 3 when you're in a massive flare-up and in having to go to the toilet and having that embarrassment. Well, now that embarrassment I feel has kind of been lifted because I have the solution on me and I can just show someone that I have the bag and I need to go and empty my bag somewhere, rather than having a really awkward conversation, can I go and use your toilet, when I can show them some proper evidence of it.
Yes, I guess that's another topic as well. So do you find yourself getting challenged when you use disabled toilets?
So I haven't been out much because my surgery happened in August and the lockdown restrictions and all of this in the UK. But before, when I've been into the rare occasion into a disabled toilet, you do get looked out funny, and it's just like, really, what are you staring at? We're in 2020 at the time, like, just be inclusive please. But yeah.
How does that make you feel? Does it make...
Well, it kind of just makes you, it made me a bit angry, but then give me the drive to want to educate people, in the sense of just telling them what it is and speaking up about it, which I have done a few times in school and stuff. So when I was diagnosed when I was 14, I talked about why I was off school for a month or so because of the flare-up, but I obviously couldn't go to school because of the embarrassment and all sorts. But I did a talk to about 80 odd people explaining how much weight I lost, which was 20 kilos in a month, with bags of pasta, which I thought was quite amusing, and then putting into perspective into like real life things, and then from there kind of won the charity supporting election. So we supported Crohn's and Colitis and raised about £1,000 for them over 2 years or something like that.
That's really good. And I tell you what, actually doing the visual aid to your weight loss, that really brings it home, like, because it's surprising how much weight you do lose during a flare, and then whenever you come into a hospital where you're that serious. I mean, I know that I dropped at least 20-25 kilos between whenever I had my bowel removed and getting out of that hospital. I think I went in at about 75, 80 kilograms and came out under 60. And I hadn't been that weight since I was probably about 10 years old. And I'm not exactly a heavyweight when it comes to body weight, but that was ridiculous. It's really interesting that you've done all these things, and I think it's an amazing effort, and it really speaks to who you are as a person. But you mentioned something there about feeling embarrassed about going to school at one point, I'm just wondering what was it that was making you feel embarrassed, and do you feel the same way about that now? And if you were to meet someone, what would you advise them?
The embarrassment came from not being at school and not having that presence of school for the month or so, and just kind of having to answer the questions from loads of people. But now, since the surgery, it's kind of, like I said, it's given me the drive to want to educate people, and that was one of the reasons I started my YouTube channel. Obviously there's loads of channels out there, but teenage channels there isn't that many of, and it would be nice to promote and talk about every aspect of the disease, whether it's exercising to literally going to the toilet, and just comparing stories is another good thing. And but yeah, the embarrassment is definitely gone.
And what would you say to someone? So say you met your alter ego or someone the same age, having similar experiences. How would you explain to them maybe that they don't need to be embarrassed? What stuff? What would your advice be to that person?
Well, I would advise doing a talk and explaining to people what the condition is, or visually showing them how much weight you've lost, and actually giving them something physical to look at and make them realise that you are really ill or have been really ill, and this is how far you've come. And not to so much get admiration from them, but just to get their realisation and to put into perspective that you may look well on the outside, but in the inside you're really ill and could be hospitalised at any point.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way to sort of put it. Maybe trying to encourage people just to speak out and talk about the elephant in the room can sometimes make it feel less of an issue. I think sometimes when you try to hold on to stuff and allow that to build inside you, it makes it even more difficult to actually talk about it in the end. I know from my experience, particularly after I had surgery, that was one of the first things that I would do. I don't know whether that's just my personality or not. I know that before my surgery, I didn't really talk about the disease very much, but then post-surgery, it was like a catalyst, should we say, to speak out a bit more. But it was also as well like there was an element of stigma and embarrassment that I felt about having an ostomy, and in order to sort of rebuttal what I would have said, people talking about me, I would generally just go, I've got this is what's happening. And it made life a lot easier for me as well. I think you mentioned earlier you're on TikTok.
Yeah, right? I am on TikTok as well.
So talk to me about TikTok. What sort of stuff do you get up to on TikTok?
Just posting the same things really on YouTube, and it's because TikTok's a kind of more emerging social platform. It's more interesting to see how uneducated people are, because I did a stoma bag change video which went viral, to be fair. It got over 75,000 views, and some of the comments were like, oh, he's got a genitalia on his stomach, and it's like, yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, definitely. And it's just like, really, people think that's on the stomach, and it's like, and then there's other people that are like, oh, I've got one too, and the community feel about meeting someone that has a stoma but has actually talked to you or like started talking to you about it is amazing to feel.
That's fantastic, because I'm fascinated by TikTok, and it's just like, it's really interesting that you stuck on a stoma bag change that went, viral. What's your other stuff do you put on there, and like, what is it about TikTok for you? Because you're in the age bracket that technically it's made for, although everyone should get on it. But it is for me, like, it's one of those weird things. Like, I see a lot of dance videos and whatnot, so I'm a bit I'm not really a dancer. But yeah, it's like, what sort of things do you do on there, and like, what is it about TikTok for you that is so engaging?
Well, because I just started like about a month ago, same with YouTube. But it is it's just easier to make the TikToks because they're shorter and you can add music easier, and it's all done on the app rather than having to spend an hour editing a video and then upload it and then wait to get views when you know there's always going to be people on TikTok 24/7. Like I was looking at the analytics of my channel, or my TikTok channel, and 50% are from Australia, and that's because I posted a video at like midnight, and because they saw it, because of the time difference, they saw it and it kind of took off. So it's definitely a different way of promoting it and just getting it out there and just being able to spark conversation with someone is a lot easier, I find.
Yeah, for definite. So where can people find you? Like, what's your TikTok handle?
Mr.Colitis.
Is that even the cool thing to say?
Yeah.
Mr.Colitis, is that it? Is that the full handle, is it? Okay, that's cool. I'm gonna have to get involved. I'm gonna have to get in there and have a look. So what is it then, Harvey? What gets you through the difficult days? Because you've had a fair few now. What would you say gets you through?
Probably having a supportive family and knowing that well, because my mum has Crohn's, knowing that she has a bit of an idea of what ulcerative colitis is to play, even though they are two completely different diseases, and not having the experience with ileostomy, as I am like the first one in my family to have one, but just having that that loving care sense kind of, and just being able to talk to her about poo, basically.
It is nice to have that thing in common, because it can be a very difficult conversation to have. So the fact that you know your mum's kind of going through the same thing, that's got to be a real positive. And yeah, having those support and relationships around are really important, because it can be a very difficult and lonely place, particularly when you're being faced with surgery at the age of 17. I don't know whether you would agree. Do you ever feel like you are cut off from your age group because of the things you're going through? Do you feel that you are able to have a social life, obviously COVID aside, and all the stuff that is really affecting social life right now? For you as a teenager, how has this disease affected your teenage life?
I wouldn't say it's affected it that much, to be fair. I have quite supportive mates, and being open about the disease has paid off, and obviously promoting on my YouTube and showing people what I'm going through has had a massive positive impact, and kind of just and it has just sparked other conversations and making people that you predominantly don't think check in on you sometimes more, and kind of doing the same to them as well. So yeah, the disease hasn't affected it at all, really, and in the recent times, of course.
That's really cool, because I think with that, like, as a parent, your kids are always a major concern. So I'm sure your mum, whenever you first got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, had some serious worries about how much impact this would have on things like school, being able to maintain friendships, sports and stuff. So the fact that you're, out there doing triathlons. Did you do triathlon? When did you get into triathlon?
So I got into triathlons when I was about 13. So about a year or so before my diagnosis. And then, kind of just carried on doing them since, really. Haven't done any for about a year and a half now, due to COVID and GCSEs and stuff. but obviously got the Ironman plans, and kind of wanting to do a full triathlon before the Ironman if possible, but do have a duathlon planned for about Easter, I think, so that will be a good experience to get back racing.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. How did you come about settling on this Ironman? Like, where did that idea come from?
I'm not really sure. I think it was one of the morphine thoughts, and it kind of stuck from me from there. Kind of hallucinated doing Hawaii Ironman and wanting to do that, and then talking to our friends that have done an Ironman, and then wanting to do one too, and kind of making a deal with Mum and making sure that she'll do it with me. As we did a marathon last summer, or 28 miles, in July in the blazing sun. It was rather hot, but yeah, since then it kind of sparks the interest to do ultra stuff and try and push my body to the limit, really.
I think it's really cool. And have you been? What's your sort of time? Is it a year, 2 years till you look to do it? Or look to compete for it?
No, so I'm doing it in September. So this year. So I got 6 months.
Oh wow! Where are you doing it? Are you doing it? Is it Tempe? Is it you're doing or?
No. Doing it in Italy.
Oh, wow! Amazing. Well, if you can get there, that will be a fantastic cherry of an Ironman. I couldn't think of any. Whereabouts in Italy are you doing it?
Romanga, so the Mediterranean coast, northeast, I think.
Okay. Do you know if the route's going to be flat or hilly?
Yeah, it's all flat, so that was one of the reasons we picked it. It's
fair one.
Yeah, so it's like a sea swim in a cove, and then a bike, rolling hills or fairly flat, and then a run out and back down the coastline, really. So it'll be rather, well, I say rather easy. It won't be rather easy. It'll be tremendously hard, or a tremendously hard day. Hoping to complete it in around under 18 hours. But yeah.
With that coming in, what sort of things have you joined to get sort of information? There's a group I'm in called Ostomy Lifestyle Athletes on Facebook. I'm just wondering, is there any groups like that maybe you've joined on Facebook or follow on Instagram and things like that might help other people?
I haven't, to be fair, but mainly because I just want to get some training under my belt and see where I'm at, and because of my being in hospital for such a long time and having a severe case of dehydration from my flare-up, I developed kidney stones. So I was going to have an operation in January, but that got cancelled, so I was going to wait till after then to try and get ready for the Ironman and start promoting it from there, but obviously it was cancelled, and just waiting for the date to have the operation.
If you're interested, there on Ostomy and Lifestyle Athletes, there's a number of triathletes on there, and I can certainly put you in touch with Michelle Wilcox, who's a GB triathlete, world champion, and then there's Fran Brown as well, who's also a Team GB world champion.
Yeah, that would be.
They're both on the group anyway, if you were to join that group. And I'm sure they would be both more than happy to talk to you, as they're both ostomates as well. So they're doing it with an ostomy. Fran's got other disabilities due to a spinal injury.
So she'd be able to chat to you about different bits and bobs and tricks that she's had to learn. But Michelle as well, fantastic. Athlete. And there's loads of them on there, to be honest with you. Sometimes it can seem a little bit sort of like, whoa, Team GB. But there are hundreds of everyday athletes that are dropping pearls of wisdom on that group all over the place. And the majority of people I used to have an ostomy, I've got a J pouch, but the majority of people in the group still have active ostomies and are regularly trialing new ways of doing things. And there's no broad science base. It is anecdotal or bro science a lot of the time. In terms of like, well, I just strapped this on, or I tried this and it worked, and I've been doing it now for the last 6 months and had no complaints. That's that kind of advice occasionally. But the likes of Michelle and that, they will give some sound advice. I'll give some sort of medical based exercise advice and things like that. But yeah, there are other groups out there, and from your perspective, how important is social media for, in your eyes, the IBD community? Do you think it's an important thing, or do you think it is maybe damaging? I don't know. What's your thoughts on social media for the IBD community in your eyes?
Yeah, I believe it is very helpful at some times, but then it can get rather overwhelming with all the potential horror stories you can read, and how quickly someone can go from having a working colon to having a stoma bag or other complications, and yeah, that on that part that is rather scary. And being a teenager, I haven't really been so much involved in it for the past couple of years, but since I've got my stoma bag, I have wanted to join more groups, and that's probably due to my age and just wanting to spread the words and help other people.
Yeah, I think that's a really positive outlook on that. I got like my own views on social media that it can, like you said, be a double-edged weapon or double-edged sword in terms of like you can get a lot of negativity. Like you've experienced some negativity on TikTok, but out of all of that negativity, you've experienced a significant amount of positive in interacting with other people, finding out that you're actually helping other people. All those things are really, really important. And just like literally how we even got on to tonight to have you on the show and chat about your condition and your journey wouldn't have happened without the powers of social media. And there's lots of things. Instagram, for one, is quite popular within the IBD community, and I think it allows you to see firsthand almost people's own journeys and people's struggles with the disease, for better or for worse. But also as well, it's like I think having that understanding, and I'm not sure how you feel about this, but having the understanding that if you think about social media like an iceberg, you're only seeing the top 1/3, you're not seeing the bottom 2/3. Or to put it the way my wife would say, is like you're judging someone else's outside by your insides. So you know how you feel and what things are going on inside your life, and then you're projecting that on someone's external, which is what they're showing on social media, and comparing the two. And that's something, as long as you're aware that that can happen, I think you can use that to help understand social media a little bit better or a little bit easier, not be so consumed by people having it better or easier. What are your thoughts? Would you agree with that, or have I gone off in a wild tangent?
No, I'd agree with that completely. Like you say, it can be used in two ways. Like most things, can be used for the better and can be used for the worst. And when it works, like you said tonight, and bringing people together, like me and you, it is like bringing you two people next door to each other rather than two people from around the UK. And it's amazing how you can connect with a range of people just like that, rather than having to like just go off what the people around you say, and getting another person's perspective on it is very, very helpful in that aspect.
That's amazing. What would your got a random top five just popped into my head. So what would be your top five positive things that have come out of having IBD for you?
Probably the sense of community, and I think I said it when I was about 14. Being part of the kind of club or cult, and just feeling like there's other people that are in the exact same position as you are. And second one, knowing that everyone's potentially having a degree of a bad day, and there's better days to come. Third, probably point, being able to overcome challenges and have that positive mindset and positive outlook on things. Fourth probably point, having relationships with different people, and just being able to build a relationship, whether it's through IBD or becoming closer to your family about it. And topmost point, seeing, mine is seeing the medical side of things, as it sparked my interest into going into paramedical science and wanting to work for the NHS. And that was predominantly, it sparked when I was 14 and kind of carried it since, but it's been set in stone since August, and wanting to kind of give back to the NHS, because I do feel slightly guilty of all the resources and drugs that were used on me, weirdly, but
what do you think's triggered that feeling, and what do you think's triggered you to feel guilty about having used the NHS?
Probably the 10-day long stay in critical care, and realising how expensive it actually is to be in hospital, which is quite scary, because one of my nurses did say I asked them, I was like, how much is the bed, and they were like, it's about 10 grand, because there's a special air mattress bed to stop like sore patches of the body and sweat patches and all sorts, and just keep your body in a different position and all sorts. And then and just all the cool machines that are kind of in the hospital that were used on me, kind of just was like, oh, the resource has been used on me, why can't it be used on someone else that's maybe more ill than me and on death row, rather than, I didn't really count myself on death row when maybe I could have done. But
what was the coolest machine that they used?
Probably the ERG machine. Watching your heart rate go up and down, and hearing all the weird noises at like 2 a.m. was cool for the first like 3 nights, and then got a bit annoying after that, because it would beep consistently if your heart rate dropped.
Totally. I could definitely compare that. Whenever they have to come around and do your observations as well, I think that's a real bummer, because it's just like always just seems to be just as you're just getting off to sleep, doesn't it? It's like, oh, we're just gonna
stick your arm out. Just need to take your blood pressure, please. And then they always had the squeaky wheel blood pressure machines for me. I was just like, 2 a.m. in the morning, really? Gonna wake me up for the next like half an hour? I literally just got to sleep because someone next to me stopped screaming. Oh, great, thanks.
And just out of curiosity, how many other teenagers were in the ward with you?
None, I don't think. Yeah.
What was the closest age person? What was the person who was the closest to your age?
I think there was about a 29-year-old. So 12 years difference.
Oh, so it's not terrible.
No, not terrible.
But that's still
the
rest a lot.
Well, the rest of them were about 60, 70 plus, and but luckily I was on a gastro ward, so they were all for similar conditions, and the guy next to me had a failed J pouch, so he was with an ileostomy and was awaiting his J pouch to be taken out. which kind of sparked my view on not wanting to get a J pouch, but obviously still sort of wanting to explore that option, because I would like to cross.
Well, what are your thoughts at the minute?
My bag is probably the best option, and I wouldn't mind sticking with it and making it permanent and getting Barbie butt surgery, as they call it. But and that's mainly because I've had one blockage in the 6 months from being at home, but that was potentially caused by the COVID vaccine, so I don't really count that as a proper blockage. And yeah, other than having a few staples needing taken out of my stoma, it's been absolutely fine and wonderful. It's so much better. And yeah, and just being able to go out for like 2 hours without needing the toilet is the biggest thing. And my worry with the J pouch is just having the bad memories come back and being associated with going to the toilet. I don't really want to experience that again. I kind of written that off and would just want to get on with using my bag.
I think that's a fair observation. Like, you know, when you do get put back together, so you'd have to have a loop ileostomy, which can be quite tricky to manage. A lot of people experience a lot of blockages and leaks when they have a loop ileostomy during the pouch creation process. And yeah, you have to relearn a lot of going to the bathroom skills and drills whenever you do get hooked back up. And I can definitely vouch that there's never a solid poo whenever you have a J pouch, because it's just, all it is exactly the same virtually that comes out of your stoma, but it comes out of your rectum. But yeah, like I can see that the side to, or both sides of that argument, and I think, you know, it's a fair one to have. And, you know, if you're comfortable with an ostomy, there's no reason why you shouldn't retain that. And you know, you obviously are aware that you can live a full and productive life with a stoma, and possibly, you know, maybe even a more contented one than you would with a J pouch. What would you? So we've talked a lot there about surgery and your experience in hospital. Well, in particular in this pandemic as well. But what would you say to someone who's maybe on the fringes of surgery, based on your experience? They were concerned about surgery and concerned about going to hospital at 17. What would you say to that person?
I would probably say try and find someone that's had the surgery and make you feel like you're being reassured by them, which happened to me. I had a friend that luckily I spoke to who has a colostomy, and kind of said that the pain disappears right after surgery, which it does, or did for me for about a week, and then obviously it returned. But definitely talk to someone that has had the experience of the surgery and compare it to the possibility of having the pain-free life, which was the biggest thing for me. But also weigh up the other options, if there are any other options, like trialing different biologics, which I didn't do, but I wanted the surgery kind of there and then and wanted a radical thing done.
No, I think that's fair. What would you say? Should they be afraid of it?
No, definitely not. They should be open-minded about it and have a positive outlook on it, really.
What would you say to someone who felt that this was an old person's disease and that they shouldn't have a stoma that's thing for old people?
Well, I'd show them myself and show them that I live with stoma. It's perfectly fine, perfectly livable. You can do whatever you like, really. Pretty much eat whatever you like. It sort of eradicates some of the foods that you couldn't eat before. In my case, dairy. I couldn't really eat that much dairy. I eat a fair amount of dairy, just trying to put back on a bit of weight. And kind kind of tell them that it's not an old person's disease, and they need to open their eyes to people speaking out about it, because there is more younger people speaking out about it, and they just need to kind of listen and observe.
I think that's great. Tell me this: have you had to eat a lot of the what are they called? It's like a probiotic yogurt that helps you put weight back on.
Yeah, I had. They were like I couldn't have the yogurt ones because they tasted too much like false milk. So I changed to the like fruit based ones, 40 juice. They come in different variations. And yeah, they taste, because they're so calorie dense, because they're like 300 calories in about 500 mils.
It's like 200 mils. Yeah.
It's ridiculous, but you do feel rather nauseous after a couple of having them. But you know they do benefit, and since losing 30 odd kilos and putting about 17 back on, it does work, and just sticking at it is key. But they are disgusting, to say the least.
I always thought it was crazy. Like I used to like the strawberry one was the only one that I could consume. But even at that, it was kind of like you drinking. It was like a lead weight just hitting your stomach, like boom. And like going, wow, I am full. But yeah, like it's a crazy world that, you know, you can consume that, and literally, like, you know, in a matter of weeks, you can put on so much weight just by consuming these crazy medicalized foods. Well, that brings me to the part of the show that I call the three truths. We talked about it earlier. I'm not sure whether you've been able to prime yourself, but essentially, it's the end of the world as you know it. You're no longer going to exist within it for whatever reason. And everything you've ever created, so your YouTube channel, TikTok's gone, no more stoma videos going viral. It's all disappeared, and you get to leave three truths. I kind of view them as life lessons for the world to learn from. What would your three truths be?
First one, and probably most important one, probably set up a campaign saying end the taboo on poo. And get people talking about their bad habits more, because it does save lives. Second one, probably normalising stoma and making sure that people know that it's not an old person's thing, and young people can have them. And third one, making sure there's enough support in hospital for patients, psychological support I'm talking, especially on the weekends, so then they can have a chat about their worries and feelings, and anything they're kind of concerned about, just to get off their mind. Because I really found that hospital kind of dies on the weekends. There's weekend staff, they're stretched a lot more, and you have no HCA to kind of be like, oh yeah, can we just have a quick 2-minute chat while you're like changing my bag or doing my bed or something. It would have just been nice to have maybe a group of volunteers, and it is something I'm going to look into, trying to get a support group for hospitals, with IBD people and other just people that want to just help out and be a pair of ears to people that are going through tough times.
To be more charitable.
I think they're great. So talk about poo, normalise stoma, and be more charitable, or three very admirable sort of life lessons I've pulled out of that. I'd like to take a minute, mate, just to appreciate yourself, for coming on at such short notice, for showing such bravery as a young man, 17 years of age, and putting yourself out there to talk about what is arguably a taboo topic, which will hopefully help other people of all ages, but more importantly for young teenagers out there that might be struggling with the disease. And yeah, I just can't help but say thank you so much for that and coming on. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure too. Pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, so thank you so much for coming on. It's been fantastic to sit and actually chat with you for the last hour. I think you're a great guy, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing your YouTube channel take off and watch you grow in that space, spreading a bit more sort of joy to the world and education into the IBD way of life and how it can be a positive more than it is a negative, and that there's always a way forward. It's really great. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, that's it for tonight's show, and we will catch you on the next one. So bye for now.